Chosen one. They aimed at everything they could see, and somehow, they still missed. Read that again. They didn't fail because they were careless. They didn't fail because they weren't prepared. They didn't fail because they didn't try hard enough. They failed because they never understood what they were actually facing. Every rumor they released was supposed to damage your name. Every plan they created was supposed to leave you standing alone. Every moment they waited for you to finally break was supposed to become the proof that they were right about you. But something happened. Something they cannot explain. The outcome they expected never arrived. The ending they planned never happened. The collapse they were waiting for never came. And the part that confuses them the most is that you noticed it too. You remember those moments. The moments where everything looked impossible. The moments where, if the story had followed the normal pattern, you should have lost. You should have fallen. You should have disappeared. But somehow, you were still there. Still breathing. Still moving. Still becoming someone they never expected you to become. Think about it. How many times in your life did something appear like it was finally going to destroy everything? The accusation that should have ruined your reputation. The betrayal that should have taken away your ability to trust anyone again. The loss that should have completely changed who you were. The door that closed when you had no other option. The season where you looked around and wondered, how am I going to come out of this? But somehow, you did. Not perfectly. Not without pain. Not without scars. But you did. And that's the part people struggle to understand. Because from the outside, they only saw the attack. They saw the moment you were pushed. They saw the moment you were tested. They saw the moment life became heavier than you thought you could carry. But they didn't see everything that happened after. They didn't see the moments where the situation suddenly shifted. They didn't see the opportunities that appeared at the exact right time. They didn't see the conversations that happened behind closed doors. They didn't see the things that almost happened, but never did. And that is where the mystery begins. Because the question was never, why did they attack you? People attack what they misunderstand. People challenge what they underestimate. People try to destroy what they believe is unprotected. The real question is, why did every attack stop short of destroying you? Why did every plan seem powerful in the beginning, but lose its strength before reaching the final result? Why did every person who was certain they had the advantage eventually find themselves facing a different outcome? Chosen one. You are not here because nothing happened to you. You are here because something happened to you, and it still wasn't enough. There is a difference. A person who has never been tested doesn't know what they are capable of. But someone who has survived things they were never supposed to survive starts seeing a pattern. And maybe you've noticed that pattern. Maybe you've looked back at your life and thought, how am I still standing? Maybe you have moments you don't even like talking about, because remembering them takes you back to a place where you felt completely alone. A night, a conversation, a decision, a season. A moment where everything could have gone another way. But it didn't. Something interrupted the ending. Something changed the direction. Something made sure the thing that was supposed to finish you. You became the thing that revealed you. Comment still standing, if you've ever looked back at your life and wondered how you made it through something that should have broken you. Because this message is not about pretending the attacks never happened. They did. The pain was real. The betrayal was real. The struggle was real. But the ending they wanted for you was never the ending you received. And that is what they never understood. They thought they were fighting someone who was alone. They thought they were attacking someone without protection. They thought they were writing the final chapter of your story. But they made one mistake. They only studied what was visible. They only measured what they could see. They never considered what was working behind the scenes. They never asked the one question that would have changed everything. What if you were never standing there by yourself? Because the truth about your story is about to become clearer. The moments you called luck, the moments you called coincidence, the moments you questioned in silence, may have been something much deeper. And once you see the pattern, you will never look at your past the same way again. Because they didn't just miss their chance to destroy you, they missed the reason they couldn't. And that changes everything. Chosen one, go back. Not to the easiest season of your life. Not to the moments where everything made sense. Go back to the season you still don't fully understand. The one they thought would finish you. The one where you looked at your own situation and wondered, how am I supposed to recover from this? Because somewhere inside that chapter you thought was your breaking point, there was a message you didn't recognize yet. Something was happening beneath the surface. Something you couldn't see while you were living through it. And now that time has passed, you can finally look back with different eyes. Ask yourself this: why did it stop where it stopped? Why didn't it go further? Why didn't the worst moment become the final moment? Think about that. You lost something. Maybe it was a relationship you thought would last forever. Maybe it was a person you believed would always be there. Maybe it was an opportunity you were certain was meant for you. Maybe it was your reputation, your confidence, your direction. Something important was taken from you, and for a moment, it felt like everything was falling apart. But then something happened. The collapse had a limit. The pain had a boundary. The storm had a point where it could go no further. You lost the job, but somehow you didn't lose yourself. You lost the friendship, but somehow you found clarity. You lost the relationship, but somehow you discovered strength you didn't know existed. You entered a season that should have destroyed your identity, but somehow you came out knowing yourself better. And that is the part people don't understand. They look at survival and call it luck. They look at recovery and call it strength. But sometimes there is something deeper happening, because not every fall is designed to finish you. Some falls reveal what was holding you. A tree that survives a storm does not survive because the storm was weak. It survives because its roots were deeper than anyone could see. And maybe that is what your life has been showing you. The storms were real. The winds were strong. The pressure was intense. But something underneath you was stronger. Something was keeping you from reaching the point of no return. Chosen one. Here is the truth that changes how you view your past. The people who hurt you were never as powerful as they believed. They thought they controlled the outcome. They thought because they could create pain, they could create your ending. But they misunderstood something important. Creating a difficult chapter is not the same as controlling the entire story. A person can throw a stone into the water, but they cannot control every wave that follows. A person can close one door, but they cannot see every door that opens afterward. A person can try to remove you from one place. Without realizing, they just moved you closer to where you were supposed to be. That is why certain things in your life feel confusing when you look back. Because at the time, they looked like losses. They looked like rejection. They looked like delays. But later, you realized some things had to leave before something better could arrive. Some people had to walk away before you could become who you were meant to become. Some doors had to close because staying behind them would have kept you trapped. And that realization is uncomfortable. Because sometimes the thing you were crying over was the same thing protecting you from something worse. Think about it. Why did certain people disappear from your life right before they could damage your future? Why did certain opportunities fail right before you would have committed your entire life to the wrong path? Why did some plans collapse before you had invested everything into them? At the time, it felt like punishment. But now, it looks different. It looks like redirection. It looks like preparation. It looks like something you couldn't see was already aware of what was ahead. Comment the floor was there if you've ever looked back at your worst season and realized you were falling, but you were never allowed to completely hit the ground. Because that is the hidden meaning behind your survival. The goal was never just to get you through the pain. The goal was to reveal something about you that comfort never could. Pain showed you your endurance. Betrayal showed you your discernment. Waiting showed you your patience. Isolation showed you your strength. And every moment you thought you were losing was quietly building something inside you. But here is where the story becomes even more interesting. Because surviving the attack was only one part. The next question is the one that changes everything. Why were you able to sense things before they happened? Why did you notice what others ignored? Why did something inside you warn you when there was no evidence yet? Because the next part of your story reveals something they misunderstood about you from the beginning. They thought your sensitivity was weakness. They never realized it was preparation. Chosen one, The things they criticized about you were never the weaknesses they thought they were. They just didn't understand what they were looking at. They saw the quietness. They saw the way you watched before speaking. They saw the way you stepped back before making decisions. They saw the way you didn't rush to prove yourself. And they created their own explanation. They called you distant. They called you afraid. They called you too careful, too sensitive, too slow. But what if they were wrong? What if the very things they mocked were the things that were preparing you for the moments they never saw coming? Because not everything that looks like weakness is weakness. Sometimes preparation looks like isolation. Sometimes growth looks like silence. Sometimes becoming stronger looks like disappearing from the noise. A seed buried beneath the ground does not look powerful. Nobody celebrates it. Nobody notices it. Nobody sees what is happening beneath the surface. But underground, something is changing. Something is developing. Something is preparing to break through. And maybe that is what happened to you. While people were judging your quiet seasons, you were developing something they couldn't measure. Discernment, awareness, patience, the ability to notice what others ignored. Chosen one, have you ever had a moment where something inside you told you, something isn't right? No evidence, no explanation, no proof. Just a feeling you couldn't shake. Everyone around you told you that you were overthinking. They told you to ignore it. They told you that you were creating problems that didn't exist. But later, the truth appeared. The person you trusted revealed their intentions. The decision you almost made would have created consequences you couldn't see. The path you almost followed would have taken you somewhere you never wanted to go. And suddenly, that feeling you ignored started making sense. That quiet voice inside you wasn't trying to make you afraid. It was trying to make you aware. Because there is a difference between fear and wisdom. Fear creates imaginary dangers. Wisdom recognizes patterns. Fear makes you run from everything. Wisdom tells you when something is worth paying attention to. And over time, you learned the difference. That is something your enemies never understood. They thought your silence meant you had nothing to say. They thought your patience meant you were powerless. They thought because you weren't reacting, you weren't aware. But they made the same mistake again. They judged what was visible. They never considered what was happening beneath the surface. A chess player does not move every piece immediately. Sometimes the strongest move is waiting, watching, understanding, allowing the other person to reveal their strategy first. And that is what your quiet seasons taught you. You learned how people move. You learned how words and actions don't always match. You learned that some smiles hide intentions. You learned that some people reveal themselves when they think you are not paying attention. The years they thought were making you weaker were actually sharpening you. Every disappointment taught you something. Every betrayal revealed something. Every painful experience added another layer of understanding. You were collecting lessons they didn't realize you were learning, and that is why they underestimated you. They thought you were standing still. You were actually becoming someone different. Think about how many times you ignored your own instincts because someone else convinced you that you were wrong. Think about the moments you apologized for noticing things that were actually true. Think about the times you doubted yourself because other people didn't understand what you were sensing. How many times did you look back and realize, I knew something was wrong. I felt it before I had proof. I saw it before everyone else did. That pattern matters. Because awareness is not something everyone develops. Some people only see things after they happen. Others recognize the signs before the outcome appears. The difference is experience. The difference is growth. The difference is everything you survived. Comment I was tuned if you have ever experienced a moment where your intuition warned you before the truth was revealed. Because the thing they called your weakness may have been one of your greatest protections. Your ability to observe. Your ability to wait. Your ability to recognize what others ignored. These things were not accidental. They were formed through everything you went through. The betrayal, the disappointment, the moments where you had nobody to depend on except your own judgment. Those seasons trained you, not to become suspicious of everyone, but to become aware. And now something becomes clear. The reason they fought you so hard was not because you were powerless. It was because, even before you understood it yourself, you were becoming someone they could no longer easily manipulate. Someone who could see through the distractions. Someone who could recognize the patterns. Someone who could no longer be controlled by the same things that once broke you. But there is still a question left unanswered. Because if they underestimated your strength, and they misunderstood your silence, then why did every attack against you eventually collapse? Why did every plan they created seem to turn around? Why did the very things they used against you become the things that exposed them? That is where the story changes. Because the next part reveals the reversal they never expected. They thought they were creating your downfall, but they were actually creating the evidence of your rise. Chosen one. Here is the part they never expected. They thought they were writing your ending, but they were actually revealing their own. That is the mistake they made from the beginning. They looked at your situation and assumed they understood the outcome. They saw you standing alone. They saw you going through pressure. They saw you refusing to fight back the way they expected. And they came to one conclusion. This is our chance. They thought your silence meant surrender. They thought your patience meant weakness. They thought because you weren't reacting, you weren't prepared. But they misunderstood the person they were dealing with. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who has already noticed everything. Sometimes the person who says the least is the person who understands the most. And sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the person they should have been careful with from the beginning. Think about it. How many times did someone make a move against you with complete confidence? They planned it. They calculated it. They believed they had the advantage. They believed they had finally found the moment where you would lose. But then something changed. The situation shifted. The truth surfaced. The plan collapsed. And somehow, the person who created the problem became the person who had to explain themselves. That pattern is difficult to ignore, because one failure can be called coincidence. Two failures can be called bad timing. But when the same thing keeps happening again and again, you start asking a different question. What am I not seeing? Chosen one. Your enemies didn't understand that every attack revealed something. Every accusation revealed their intentions. Every lie revealed their character. Every attempt to damage you showed other people exactly who they were. They thought they were removing your reputation, but they were actually exposing theirs. They thought they were creating doubt around your name, but they were creating questions about their own motives. They thought they were making you look smaller, but they were showing everyone how threatened they were by your existence. And that is the reversal they never planned for. A person can control a story for a moment. They can convince people temporarily. They can manipulate emotions. They can create confusion. But eventually, patterns speak louder than words. A person can pretend for a day, maybe even for years. But eventually their own actions reveal what their words were trying to hide. And this is what happened. They kept making moves. You kept standing. They kept trying to create chaos. You kept finding peace. They kept expecting you to react emotionally. You kept becoming more controlled. And the more they pushed, the more they revealed that they were never actually in control. Imagine a chess player who believes they are winning because they are moving quickly. They are focused on the pieces they are attacking. They are celebrating every move. But they never looked at the entire board. They never noticed the position they were creating for themselves. They never realized that every move they made was slowly leading them into a trap of their own making. That is what happens when people operate from pride. They become so focused on defeating someone else, they fail to see what their own choices are creating. Chosen one. Have you ever watched someone spend so much energy trying to prove something about you, only for everyone to eventually see the truth about them? Have you ever seen someone create a situation against you, only for that same situation to reveal their own character? That moment is powerful, because it teaches you something. You don't always have to fight every battle. Sometimes the greatest victory is allowing time to reveal what you never had to prove. Comment their plan failed if you have ever watched someone create a situation against you that eventually exposed them instead. Because that is the part they never expected. They expected a reaction. They expected anger. They expected you to make a mistake. They wanted you to give them something they could use against you. But you didn't. You became harder to provoke, harder to manipulate, harder to control. And that changed the entire situation. The person they thought they could break became the person they couldn't move. The person they thought would disappear became the person they had to acknowledge. The person they underestimated became the person they couldn't ignore. And the strangest part? You didn't become stronger by becoming like them. You became stronger by refusing to become what they wanted you to become. They wanted bitterness. You found wisdom. They wanted chaos. You found discipline. They wanted revenge. You found purpose. And that is why their attacks lost power. Because they were fighting a version of you that no longer existed. They were attacking old wounds that had already healed. They were using old strategies against someone who had already grown beyond them. But there is still something deeper you need to understand. Because surviving the attack is one thing. But the moment everything truly shifted was not when they stopped attacking. It was when you stopped needing them to understand you. That was the moment they lost access to your peace. And that is where the next chapter begins. Because the greatest change wasn't happening around you. It was happening inside you. Chosen one, at some point, something changed. Not around you, inside you. And that change is something the people who tried to hurt you will never fully understand. Because they were watching for a reaction. They were waiting for anger. They were waiting for you to break. They were waiting for you to prove that their actions had power over you. But one day, you stopped giving them what they were looking for. You stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped chasing people who had already decided to see you the wrong way. You stopped trying to convince everyone that your heart was in the right place. And that is when everything started changing. Because the moment you stop fighting for approval from people who already judged you, you get your power back. Think about the old version of yourself. The version that needed answers. The version that replayed conversations in your head. The version that wondered, why did they do this? Why didn't they understand me? Why did they choose to believe that? You carried questions that had no answers. You searched for explanations from people who benefited from keeping you confused. You wanted them to finally see what you saw. You wanted them to admit what they did. But eventually, you realized something. Peace does not come when everyone finally understands you. Peace comes when you understand that everyone does not need to. That was the shift. The moment you stopped handing other people the responsibility of defining your worth. A lighthouse does not argue with the storm. It does not chase the waves. It does not scream at the darkness and demand that the night disappear. It simply stands. It keeps shining. And eventually, everything that was lost finds its way because of that light. That is what started happening to you. You became steady. Not because life became easier. Not because people suddenly became kinder. But because you stopped allowing every outside voice to control your inside world. And that is something your enemies never expected. They understood how to attack your emotions. They understood how to create confusion. They understood how to make you question yourself. But they didn't understand what would happen when those same attacks stopped working. Because the person they were trying to destroy was no longer the same person they first encountered. The insult that once ruined your entire day, it doesn't carry the same weight anymore. The opinion that once controlled your confidence, it no longer decides who you are. The rejection that once felt like the end, you now see it as a redirection. Something changed. And people can feel that change. They may not know how to explain it. They may not even admit they notice it. But they notice. They notice when someone who used to react becomes calm. They notice when someone who used to seek approval becomes secure. They notice when someone who used to defend every accusation simply keeps moving. Because silence is powerful when it comes from peace. Not fear, not weakness. Peace. Chosen one, there is a difference between someone who has nothing to say and someone who has learned they don't need to say everything. There is a difference between someone who cannot fight back and someone who has become wise enough to choose their battles. And that difference is what unsettles the people who expected you to stay the same. They knew the old version of you. They knew what words could trigger you. They knew what situations could make you doubt yourself. They knew what buttons to press. But then one day, they pressed those same buttons, and nothing happened. That is when they realized something had changed. You were no longer responding from your wounds. You were responding from your growth. You were no longer trying to prove that you mattered. You were walking like someone who already knew. Comment, I stopped explaining, if you have noticed that your peace increased when you stopped trying to convince people who had already made up their minds. Because that is one of the biggest signs of transformation. You stop needing the world to validate what you already know inside. You stop chasing every misunderstanding. You stop fighting every rumor. You stop carrying every opinion. Not because you don't care, but because you finally understand what deserves your energy. And that changes the entire battlefield. Because someone who controls your emotions controls your direction. But someone who controls their own emotions becomes difficult to manipulate. And that is what happened. The attacks didn't stop because everyone suddenly became good. The attacks lost power because they no longer had the same access to you. The door they used to enter your peace was closed. The weakness they used to exploit became wisdom. The pain they used to create became strength. And this is where the story takes another turn. Because when you stop fighting to prove yourself, you start noticing something else. 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 And when you put all those pieces together, you begin to see something you couldn't see while you were surviving. The attacks were real, but so was the protection. The losses were painful, but so was the preparation. The silence wasn't empty. Something was happening behind the scenes. And in the next chapter, we look at the evidence. The moments you thought were random, that may have been connected all along. Because sometimes the strongest proof that something was working for you is not what happened. It is what never happened. Chosen one, there comes a moment in every journey when what was happening quietly can no longer stay hidden. A moment when you look back at your own life and realize, wait, that wasn't random. That wasn't just timing. That wasn't just coincidence. Because the things that once confused you start forming a pattern. The closed doors, the unexpected endings, the people who disappeared, the opportunities that appeared at the exact moment you almost gave up. The situations that looked like losses, but somehow protected you from something worse. At the time, you couldn't understand it. You only saw what was happening in front of you. You saw the disappointment. You saw the rejection. You saw the betrayal. You saw the doors closing in your face. But what you couldn't see was what those moments were making room for. Chosen one, sometimes protection does not look like something being added to your life. Sometimes protection looks like something being removed. And that is the part most people struggle to understand. Because we naturally celebrate what arrives. But we rarely recognize what leaves. We celebrate the new opportunity. But we don't always recognize the old opportunity that would have destroyed us. We celebrate the new people entering our lives. But we don't always understand the people who had to leave before they could damage our future. We celebrate open doors, but we forget that some closed doors were the reason we survived. Think about your own story. Was there ever something you desperately wanted, but it didn't happen? A relationship you thought you needed. A job you thought was your only chance. A friendship you thought would last forever. At that moment, it probably felt like rejection. It probably felt like life was working against you. But looking back now, do you see it differently? Do you see how that disappointment created space for something else? Do you see how something ending protected something inside you? Because sometimes, the thing you are crying over today is the thing you would have thanked God for removing tomorrow. The hardest moments are not always punishments. Sometimes they are redirections. A person planting a seed underground might think the darkness means nothing is happening. But beneath the surface, roots are forming. Growth is happening where nobody can see. And then one day, what was hidden becomes visible. That is what happens with transformation. The world sees the result. They don't see the process. They see the confidence. They don't see the nights you questioned yourself. They see the strength. They don't see the moments you almost gave up. They see the victory. They don't see the battles you survived to get there. Chosen one, this is why some people are confused by you. They only know the chapter they entered. They don't know the chapters that built you. They see your calm. They don't know your storms. They see your wisdom. They don't know your mistakes. They see your patience. They don't know how much pain taught you. And that is why they underestimate you. They judge the tree by the fruit, without understanding the roots. But roots are built in darkness. Growth happens before anyone notices. And that is exactly what happened with you. While people were watching the surface, something deeper was changing. Your mindset changed. Your standards changed. Your awareness changed. Your ability to recognize what belongs in your life changed. And suddenly, the same things that once controlled you no longer had power over you. The same people who once made you question yourself could no longer move you. The same situations that once broke you became reminders of what you survived. That is the visible change. Not just that your circumstances improved, but that you became someone who could handle what was coming next. Because the truth is, a blessing without preparation can become a burden. An opportunity without maturity can become destruction. Sometimes the waiting period is not because you are forgotten. Sometimes it is because you are being prepared. A building does not start with the beautiful design people see from the outside. It starts with a foundation buried underground. Nobody applauds the foundation. Nobody takes pictures of the foundation. Nobody celebrates the foundation. But without it, everything eventually falls. Chosen one, your hidden seasons were your foundation. The moments nobody saw. The battles nobody understood. The growth nobody recognized. Those moments were building something inside you. And now people are beginning to notice. They notice your confidence. They notice your discipline. They notice that you are no longer easily shaken. They notice that the person they thought they could control is no longer available. Because something shifted. The person they attacked is not the person standing here today. The person who cried alone learned how to stand. The person who needed answers learned how to trust the process. The person who feared losing people learned that losing the wrong people is sometimes protection. Comment, the pattern is real. If you have ever looked back at your life and realized that some things had to fall apart before something better could be built. Because when you see the pattern, you stop looking at your past as a collection of random painful moments. You start seeing a story where every lesson mattered, every delay had meaning, every ending created space, every battle produced something. And now, the people who thought they were watching you fall are beginning to realize they were watching you transform. They thought they were witnessing your destruction. They were actually witnessing your preparation. They thought they were closing your chapter. They were actually helping you turn the page. But there is still one question that remains. If all of these moments were connected, if all these situations had a purpose, if you were protected through everything that tried to break you, then what was actually standing behind you this entire time? Because the evidence is there. The pattern is there. The survival is there. But the source of it is the revelation that changes everything. And that is what we uncover next. Chosen one. Now the pieces begin to connect. The moments you couldn't explain. The doors that closed. The battles you survived. The situations that should have destroyed you but somehow became the things that built you. For so long, you looked at your story through the eyes of someone trying to survive. You saw the pain. You saw the rejection. You saw the losses. You saw the attacks. But now, you are starting to see something different. You are starting to see the protection. Because sometimes the greatest evidence that something was watching over you is not what happened. It is what should have happened. but didn't. Think about that. There were moments when everything could have gone another way. Moments where one decision could have changed everything. Moments where one person's betrayal could have completely destroyed your future. Moments where one mistake could have taken you somewhere you never recovered from. But somehow, you were redirected. Somehow, you were pulled away. Somehow, you survived. And the question that has followed you for years is finally becoming clearer. How am I still here? Chosen one, you were never as alone as you thought. The silence made you believe nothing was happening. The waiting made you believe you were forgotten. The struggle made you believe you were fighting by yourself. But sometimes the quietest seasons are the seasons where the deepest work is being done. A farmer does not dig up a seed every day to check if it is growing. The seed grows in silence. The roots develop in darkness. The foundation forms where nobody is watching. And then one day, the evidence appears. The same thing happens in your life. There were things happening that you could not see. There were situations being moved that you never knew existed. There were dangers that never reached you because they were removed before they arrived. There were paths you never walked because you were redirected away from them. And at the time, you called it disappointment. You called it bad luck. You called it another setback. But now, you are beginning to understand. Some of the greatest protections in your life came disguised as losses. Some of the greatest blessings arrived disguised as endings. Some of the greatest answers came disguised as unanswered prayers. Chosen one, not every closed door was rejection. Some doors closed because they were leading you somewhere you were never meant to go. Not every person who walked away was a loss. Some people left because they could not go where your next chapter was taking you. Not every delay was denial. Some delays were preparation, because the version of you that needed those things before is not the version of you standing here now. You have changed. You have grown. You have become someone who can carry what you once prayed for. And that is the revelation. The protection was never only about keeping you from destruction. It was about preparing you for purpose. Because surviving something is one thing, but becoming someone because of it is something completely different. Think about a diamond. A diamond is not created because it avoids pressure. It is created because it survives pressure. The pressure does not destroy its value. The pressure reveals it. And that is what happened with you. The betrayal revealed your discernment. The rejection revealed your strength. The waiting revealed your patience. The loneliness revealed your ability to stand without applause. The storms revealed your foundation. Everything they thought would weaken you became the very thing that developed you. That is why they are confused, because they expected pain to make you smaller. Instead, pain made you deeper. They expected hardship to make you bitter. Instead, it made you wiser. They expected you to spend your life trying to prove them wrong. Instead, you became too focused on becoming yourself. And that is the part they cannot understand. You didn't win because you defeated them. You won because you stopped allowing them to define your journey. Chosen one, there is a reason certain people cannot recognize your transformation. Because they only knew the version of you that was struggling. They knew the version of you that was searching. They knew the version of you that was trying to survive. They never met the person you became through the process. They never saw the battles you fought internally. They never saw the moments you chose growth over giving up. They never saw the discipline it took to keep moving when nobody was encouraging you. They only see the result. But you know the journey. You know what it cost. You know what you had to overcome. And that knowledge gives you something powerful. Peace. Because when you know what carried you through the storm, you stop fearing every cloud. When you know you survived what should have ended you, you stop being controlled by what might happen next. You walk differently. You think differently. You move differently. Not because you believe nothing difficult will happen again, but because you know difficulty cannot erase you. Chosen one, the people who attacked you thought they were fighting against your life, but they were actually contributing to your transformation. Every obstacle forced you to grow. Every disappointment forced you to become independent. Every betrayal forced you to see clearly. Every attack forced you to discover strength you didn't know existed. And now, The same people who underestimated you are watching something they never predicted. You are still standing, not because life was easy, not because you never faced pain, but because every attempt to destroy you became another opportunity to rebuild stronger. Comment, I was covered. If you look back at your life and realize you survived moments you honestly thought you would never overcome. Because that realization changes everything. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And you start asking, what was this preparing me for? That is the shift. That is the moment you stop seeing yourself as someone who was attacked and start seeing yourself as someone who was being prepared. But there is still one final piece. Because protection alone is not the end of the story. The question is, who did all of this protection create you to become? Because the greatest revelation is not just that you survived. It is that you became someone who can never return to who you were before. And that is where your new identity begins. Chosen one, this is where everything finally comes together. The attacks, the betrayals, the losses, the moments where you thought you were forgotten, the seasons where you wondered why life felt heavier for you than everyone else. You can finally see them differently now. Because the greatest part of your story was never just that you survived. The greatest part was who you became because you survived. That is the truth they never understood. They thought the goal was to destroy you. They thought if they could break your confidence, if they could make you question yourself, if they could make you feel alone, then they would win. But they misunderstood something important. Some people are not destroyed by pressure. Some people are revealed by it. And you were revealed. Every season that tried to take something from you was secretly giving something back. The betrayal took away your innocence, but it gave you wisdom. The rejection took away your comfort, but it gave you independence. The waiting took away your ability to control everything, but it gave you patience. The battles took away your old identity, but they introduced you to your real one. Chosen one. You are not the same person who entered those storms. And that is why the things that once controlled you no longer have the same power. The old version of you needed everyone to understand. The new version of you understands that your purpose does not require everyone's approval. The old version of you chased answers. The new version of you trusts the process. The old version of you feared losing people. The new version of you understands that losing the wrong people can be the beginning of finding yourself. That is the transformation. Not becoming someone who never gets hurt. Becoming someone who cannot be destroyed by hurt. Think about a tree that survives the strongest storms. The storm does not make the tree weak. The storm forces the roots to grow deeper. And after years of surviving storms, the tree becomes stronger than it was before. That is what happened to you. Your roots became deeper. Your awareness became sharper. Your patience became stronger. Your ability to recognize what belongs in your life became clearer. You are no longer easily impressed by things that once distracted you. You are no longer easily controlled by opinions that once wounded you. You are no longer willing to sacrifice your peace just to keep people comfortable. Because once you have survived losing everything, you stop being afraid of losing what was never truly yours. Chosen one. This is why some people feel different around you now. They may not say it. They may not understand it. But they sense the change. They sense that you are not looking for validation the way you used to. They sense that you are not desperate for acceptance. They sense that something inside you became unshakable. Because confidence built from praise can disappear when the praise stops. But confidence built from survival is different. Nobody can convince you that you are weak after you have watched yourself survive things that should have broken you. Nobody can convince you that you are incapable after you have overcome things nobody thought you would. Nobody can convince you that your story is over when you have already seen impossible chapters unfold. And that is your new identity. Not someone who never faced darkness. Someone who learned how to carry light through it. Not someone who avoided battles. Someone who discovered strength because of them. Not someone who was protected because they were fragile. Someone who was protected because something valuable was being developed. Chosen one. The people who tried to destroy you were focused on the wrong thing. They focused on your circumstances. They focused on your current position. They focused on what they could see. But they never understood what was happening underneath. They never saw your growth. They never saw your discipline. They never saw your transformation. They never saw that every attack was forcing you to become someone they could no longer manipulate. That was their greatest mistake. They thought they were fighting the person you were. They never realized they were creating the person you would become. Comment, I was never alone. If you look back and realize that somehow, through every impossible moment, you were carried through things you thought would end you. Because that is the final truth. You were never defined by what happened to you. You were defined by what you chose to become afterward. The world may remember the attacks, but you will remember the growth. They may remember the moment they tried to hurt you, but you will remember the moment you discovered yourself. They may remember the struggle, but you will remember the strength it created. And now, you step into a different season, not because there will never be another challenge, but because you are no longer the person who faces challenges the same way. You have learned. You have grown. You have transformed. And the person standing here today is someone they never prepared for. Chosen one, you do not need revenge. Your growth is the answer. You do not need to prove your worth. Your journey already revealed it. You do not need everyone to believe in you. You have already learned how to keep moving when nobody did. The greatest victory was never making them regret what they did. The greatest victory was becoming someone they could never break. So walk forward, not with bitterness, not with fear, not with the need to explain yourself. Walk forward with peace. Walk forward with wisdom. Walk forward knowing that every chapter that tried to destroy you was actually building you, because they attacked what they could see. They attacked your situation. They attacked your reputation. They attacked your confidence. But they missed the most important thing. They missed what was being built inside you. And that is why you are still standing. That is why your story continues. That is why your greatest chapter is not behind you. It is ahead of you. If this message found you at the right moment, comment, my story is not finished. Because it isn't. The person you were yesterday survived, so the person you are becoming today could rise. Your story was never about the people who tried to destroy you. It was always about the person you were becoming because they failed. Welcome to your new identity, chosen one. The battle revealed you. The pressure shaped you. The journey prepared you. And now, it is your time to step forward.